Kawasaki is looking into the future with a new drive concept, hybrid electric vehicle. It is installed for the first time in the Ninja 7 Hybrid. I've ridden it here now. Let's talk about what it can and cannot do. It will be exciting. Yes, hybrid technology has now also arrived in bikes. It actually took a long time. The first full hybrid car, the Toyota Prius, came onto the market in 1997. And now, 26 years later, Kawasaki has managed to incorporate this technology into a bike. I've already said the word, the first full hybrid motorcycle to be built in large-scale production. Shall I briefly explain what full hybrid means? Well, there is also the term mild hybrid, which we also know from the automotive world. This means that the electric motor is only there for support and cannot work on its own. And then there is full hybrid, which we have also installed here, meaning that the electric motor can also drive itself and does not necessarily need the support of the gasoline engine. Then there's plug-in hybrid, which is the same system as a full hybrid, but you can also plug it in to charge the battery, which we don't have here. Battery, I've already mentioned it. How does this whole system work? Well, the heart of the system is still a gasoline engine, a pure two-cylinder, 451 cubic centimeters, and that is actually the engine that is also installed in the Eliminator 500. In other words, classic Kawasaki large-scale production technology. And behind the cylinder bank sits the electric motor, which is 9 kilowatts strong and is powered by a 48-volt battery located under the seat. It's a huge thing, but I think it's nicely hidden, and above all, it offers enough power for the electric motor to work on its own because, as I said, it's a full hybrid. You can choose on this bike. When I'm out and about in the city, I can select the pure electric motor that I have here in electric mode, which gives me a range of around 12 kilometers fully electric in the city, and we've already tried that this morning. It's a very, very exciting experience because I'm used to electric motorcycles, but it works differently in hybrid mode because in an emergency, the gasoline engine should still be able to switch on if the electric power runs out. In other words, when you start riding electrically, the transmission shifts as well. Speaking of transmission, we have an electric motor here. We have an automatic transmission here. So it works with one clutch, not two clutches like another manufacturer from Japan. It's a simple clutch, an electronic one, but you can also shift up and down using two buttons on the handlebars. But we no longer have a clutch and we no longer have a gear lever in the foot area. So this electric mode in the city, to come back to that, is exciting precisely because the transmission is constantly shifting. You always have this load change when driving while these gears shift through, and you soon realize that this electric mode is purely for the city because it works up to fourth gear where it shifts automatically and up to a top speed of 64 kilometers. So this electric motor, it's really only intended for short distances in the city because it doesn't feel like it has the electric power that you're used to from an electric motorcycle, that there's a real electric punch. No, it's more of a support here, and it's intended to help me manage short distances electrically. Speaking of power, I haven't even told you about it. So the 451 cubic centimeter pure two-cylinder produces 59 horsepower without electric assistance, and when the electric assistance is added, it can produce up to 69 horsepower. Same with the torque. The engine has 43 Newton meters of torque as standard, and when the electric power is added, it can produce up to 60 Newton meters of torque. What does it mean when the electric power is added? Well, we have several driving modes in this vehicle. We have, as already mentioned, the pure electric mode, and then we have eco hybrid and sport hybrid. Eco hybrid is there so that when I'm driving in the city or just commuting, I can start off electrically and then the engine kicks in to do most of the work. But the electric motor is there for starting off, and in the sport hybrid, I almost always drive with just the engine, but when I open the throttle fully, the electric motor kicks in and gives me extra power, and if I want, I can even select an e-boost button, which gives me even more electric boost. But I want to talk about that later because it's just mid-morning. We've been riding through the city, and Kawasaki have provided us with a small testing ground where we can try out all the features. But what I've already noticed on this testing ground and after our short electric ride through Barcelona is that this 48 volt battery runs out relatively quickly. As I said, we have an electric only range of around 12 kilometers. And that's the nice thing about this vehicle. You don't have to plug it in anywhere. We have plug-in hybrids. It charges itself. So as soon as you drive with the petrol engine and go above 3000 RPM, the battery is automatically recharged. This means that you can actually recharge the battery yourself during normal driving. You don't have to plug it into a socket unless you're at full throttle, in which case the electric motor switches on, and then of course it can't charge at the same time. So if you're cruising around normally, you'll never actually have a problem recharging this electric battery, because the system is so clever that it charges itself when I don't need the electric motor when I'm on the gas. That was a brief introduction, a short introduction to this vehicle, because there really is a lot to say about the Ninja 7 Hybrid. Yes, as I said, that was a rough overview of the technology. Now it's time for us to head out into the countryside where we'll test the other riding modes, the Eco Hybrid and the Sport Hybrid. How sporty something like this really is to drive, the weight on the scales, because it's still 227 kilograms curb weight. We'll find out. I'll get back to you later. See you soon. The day with the Kawasaki Ninja 7 Hybrid is over, and it was not only the most exciting vehicle I've ever ridden, but also the most mentally complicated. But I'll explain why later. Now I want to talk briefly about the looks, because they are functional among other things. So if you look at it, we clearly have a mix between a sport touring motorcycle and a sports bike, a beautiful Kawasaki Ninja design with new front lights for 2023. In keeping with this sport touring motorcycle look, we have handlebars that are rather higher, but that makes the ergonomics more comfortable. Why is the look functional? Well, if you look at the front, you can see two radiators, one for the engine and a smaller radiator for the electric motor. But here on this side, looking towards you, where the hybrid lettering is, there's an air intake and it leads to the 48 volt battery at the rear. This cools it down and then the air flows back out at the rear. So it's not just visual. These air grills, that's where the warm air flows out. Why did I say it was mentally exhausting to ride? Well, it's quite simple. Riding a hybrid bike is not the same as riding a normal bike. And I have recorded for you what that means and what the starting procedure looks like. So now I want to demonstrate to you what it means to ride a hybrid, how to start something like this, because there's a lot to choose from. Like any normal bike, we start the ignition once and you'll see a large selection of buttons. When I start, the bike always tells me that I'm in sport hybrid mode. That's the standard mode that I always use to start. But if I want to switch to hybrid, I have to press and hold the heavy EV button here. And you can already see that we're switching to EV mode. Then it's just a matter of pressing the start button, engaging the gear, very important. I do that here with my finger, and then it starts. All right, let's say we want to drive with the engine again. Then I press the EV button here again and we get into sport mode. Here we have the engine running and it's important to select gear again and I can drive off. Here in sport mode, however, it is very important that I shift gears manually. Here with the fingers forward and back. Then quite simply mode selection, I can also go into eco mode. Here I even have a start-stop automatic, so if I had already been riding a bit and stopped again, I would go into a start-stop mode. In eco mode, I can also use the button here, automatic or manual, is displayed here via AT, which means I'm in automatic mode. Last but not least, we have the walk mode. We see that here then the display turns red-orange. I have to start the vehicle again and it's already showing me walk mode. What do I have to do here? Put the bike back into gear. And there I am. Here it is in forward or reverse, and then I can either roll forwards using the throttle grip or I can also roll backwards using the negative position of the throttle grip. It works up to a maximum of 3 kilometers per hour in either direction. This makes it easier for me to maneuver, and to exit walk mode, I simply press and hold again. Another feature that I have to mention and also want to correct myself is that I have the e-boost button in sport mode. What does that mean? When I'm on the gas, it already shows me here, e-boost, that it's ready. and then by pressing a button on the e-boost, I have the option of tapping into this e-boost to have the full 69 horsepower. And it works for 5 seconds at a time, and then it has to recharge, and it also works across gear changes. And finally, I might ask you, why is the e-boost button flashing now? Quite simply, it's ready now, and I could start a launch here. We tried it earlier, and you can see what it looks like here on the GoPro. This means that the electric motor and the gasoline engine work together so that I have a really fast launch from the traffic lights. It's even faster than a 1000 ccc Kawasaki claims. All I can say is, yes, it's very, very fast. Before I get to my riding impressions, because unfortunately it's just starting to rain here in Barcelona, I want to show you the most important things. Firstly, the ergonomics. I'm 1.75 centimeters, seat height is 795 millimeter, and you can see that I sit very comfortably on it. So it's already a compact bike. The wheelbase was chosen to be a bit longer, simply to cope with the torque. But as you can see from the ergonomics, it's a very relaxed bike. The knee angle is relatively acute, so I think when you get taller, it could become a bit uncomfortable to sit on, but it's still okay for my height. And as I said, the handlebars are significantly raised. That means I really don't have any problems on my day trip. And if I want to talk about driving, then I actually have to focus on all the rider modes that we have. So electric, eco hybrid, and sport hybrid. This might take a little longer, so let's talk briefly about the components we have installed. So a fork at the front, standard fork, not adjustable. At the rear, a spring bail with adjustable preload. But I was quite surprised. It works well. So I have a high level of comfort in the city when I ride over gully covers or speed bumps. But at the same time, when I get onto the road and it gets sportier, I get really good feedback from the vehicle. I can steer it nicely through the bends, and above all, I was surprised that you don't even notice the weight of 227 kilograms. Everything is kept very compact. The center of gravity is in the middle of the vehicle. That means I can steer it really nicely through the corners and have real riding pleasure. The brakes have a double disc at the front and a single disc at the rear, with ABS support of course, and it works just as I expect it to in this class. I mean, we actually have a 450 with 650 power, but that's a good average. So I have enough reserves here in terms of brakes and can be really sporty on the road. But as a sporty rider, I want to talk about my riding impressions right now. I already mentioned it in the morning. One of the things we have for city driving is the electric mode, the EV mode. I tried it again today, here in the afternoon, and I think it's cool that you can switch back to electric mode while the rider is driving. So if I'm driving in eco-hybrid mode, I can switch back to electric mode when I'm going under 30 kilometers per hour. And that means I don't have any noise during the ride. I'm driving purely on electricity, and I find that particularly pleasant in the city. But even if you set off in the morning and maybe have neighbors who don't like you that much, you can drive away electrically. You can get up to 64 kilometers per hour. That's enough for the city. So I think it's a great mode if you want to take it a bit easier if you're traveling in the city. You're aware that you don't want to annoy people. I think that works really well. The eco-hybrid mode is also very helpful in the city, and I can drive it in two ways. On the one hand, manually and then automatically. So I always have the start-stop system active in both versions as I can drive it, and the electric motor helps when starting off. In other words, I start off electrically and only then does the engine kick in. In other words, it's a classic hybrid as we know it from cars, and I think it works really well. The only thing I've noticed about automatic mode is that it's not a driving mode, so if you use it outside the city it becomes difficult, quite simply because it shifts at 4000 revs. This means that if I accelerate quickly, I can really be in 6th gear within a few seconds, simply because this mode is completely designed for efficiency in automatic mode. With it, you still achieve the stated fuel consumption of 3.7 liters per 100 kilometers. But I've already noticed that when I want to drive away from the traffic lights more quickly, it's not like that, because it immediately shifts up a gear to get me on the road as efficiently as possible. What I also noticed in eco-hybrid mode while I was driving automatically is that there is no kick down. Otherwise, with other automatic transmissions, if you hold the accelerator and then open it fully, you have a kick down function, it shifts down automatically. This simple clutch can't do that. That means I have to override the system, I have to downshift with my thumb so that I have more power available again and can perhaps get out of a tricky situation. In other words, I would really only recommend eco-hybrid mode in the automatic setting if you drive your commute, know your route, but just want to flow with the traffic. Then the mode is okay, then it is very relaxed, as I said before, start-stop automatic. I think it's a cool feature and it works very well here on the Kawasaki. But if you want to be sportier or you really want to get off the gas quickly, then you should really switch to manual. Because I think the Eco Hybrid is very okay in manual. Yes, and not the e-boost mode function, but I can play around with the gears myself. I have the start-stop function, and above all, the bike starts up electrically when I need it so that I can save fuel and above all, drive quietly in the city. I was just about to check whether my camera was still working. Someone speaks to me, completely enthusiastic, then it's the new Ninja. I say, yes, hybrid, and he, what, hybrid, that's possible? That's on a bike? And me, yes, brother, that's possible. Completely awesome. So you can see, as I've already mentioned, the look speaks for itself. People are curious because this hybrid is something completely new, a bike that inspires. But the last riding mode I want to address is the sport hybrid mode. This is always standard on the bike. And this is really the mode that you actually want to use most of the time. I say it like it is. It's the sportiest mode, it's not the most economical mode, but then you can see the potential that hybrid has in the bike because I don't have the start-stop function. And the electric motor helps me very easily when starting off, and I always have to drive manually. Those are the facts. But I have a nice response from the engine, and then the cool thing, which I mentioned earlier, is the e-boost button. This e-boost button is located on the right-hand side of the handlebars. It's a huge button, you can't miss it, and it gives me the power from the electric motor. And while we were riding, I figured out that this is a boost button, but it's mainly a cheat button. Simply for cheating, because it's a small 2-cylinder. You need the right revs if you want to drive out of a bend. What happens if you don't ride it? Well, you'd have to downshift, but not on the Ninja. What do? You press the e-boost button, you have an electric boost for 5 seconds, and you have nitro, just like in a video game. Put simply, it's really a boost button that covers up when you shift wrong. And that's another cool feature, because we were driving down there, a beautiful track near Barcelona, and I realized that I don't really need to change gear. Third gear is enough, because the top speed in third gear is enough. Then I drive through the bend, press the e-boost button, and the thing just fires ahead. And I see this funny animation on the display that reminds me of a video game. I think the sport hybrid mode is actually almost the best mode. Now I also understand why it's the default mode. Simply because it offers the widest range in terms of what it delivers. It gives you a bit of electric assistance in the city. But if you need to get out of a tricky situation where you would have to downshift on another bike, you can just quickly press e-boost. You have electric and gasoline power and pull away. Another thing I've noticed when riding, I've already mentioned it a few times, is the shifting. It's the automatic transmission here, a clutch, not a dual clutch transmission. It works, but it could work even better. I'll be honest, because on the one hand you notice the load changes when changing gear, especially in electric mode. You really notice how the whole vehicle swings when you change gear. And that's quite something, especially when I was driving in eco hybrid mode with the automatic. I get quite a shake with the transmission. I would almost wish for a dual clutch transmission for this hybrid concept. That would make a lot of things possible. That would also make the kick possible in automatic mode. I think that would be practical. But otherwise, once you get used to it, it's actually okay. So downshifting is really fine. It adjusts the speed nicely. In other words, there's no punch when downshifting or upshifting. If you're expecting a power change, then you're prepared for it anyway, and it doesn't cause any unrest in the vehicle. I think that's okay. But it just doesn't work as smoothly as a quick shifter or even a dual clutch transmission. Another thing you have to get used to with the transmission is the fact that you can't downshift. You can only shift while you're on the gas. Precisely because it doesn't have a dual clutch, it has to unlock the clutch and engage a lower gear, and only then continues. This means that whenever you want to accelerate and go down a gear, you have to close the throttle, shift down, and only then can you accelerate again. It's a matter of getting used to it. It disappears after a while, especially when you're in Sport Factory mode. You're driving with the e-boost anyway. But it was the first few kilometers where I thought to myself, now shift down, but I have to release the throttle first and then shift down. Where it came in useful again, however, was on the country road. If you haven't been riding the bike for any significant length of time, you might not know which button is for what. In other words, I often wanted to upshift but pressed the downshift button, but luckily it didn't downshift because I was on the gas. In other words, you can see it as a safety feature. But I think it's something in the transmission where Kawasaki could improve, because it could be installed. It would add weight, it would be more expensive, but I think it's something that this concept deserves, especially if you then maybe put it in a touring bike, because Kawasaki had real plans to put it in other vehicle concepts in the future. In other words, a dual clutch transmission would be something really nice. Speaking of transmission, another negative thing I noticed is the fact that I can't turn the vehicle off in gear. So right now the ignition is off, the vehicle is in neutral. This means that if I park it downhill, I have no way of preventing the vehicle from rolling away. This is because the front brake or even the foot brake do not have a locking function like some scooters have. This means that the vehicle is always idling and I can't stop it from rolling away. This is something that would certainly have been technically possible but wasn't installed here. What we also don't have on board is traction control. The Japanese engineers thought it would have been too complicated to combine it with the e-boost and the electric motor. But let me tell you, when the road is dry, we had no traction problems today, even with e-boost, especially because the e-boost only works from a lean angle of 10 degrees or less. In other words, you can't use e-boost at full lean angles anyway. So let me come to a final conclusion with the Kawasaki Ninja 7 Hybrid, the world's first full hybrid bike on the market. On one hand, I find it incredibly exciting and great that Kawasaki is launching something like this on the market. They are real technology pioneers, on one side with the compressor, now with the hybrid. So I think it's really cool that something like this exists. What did I like? Basically the drive concept, because if you play around with it a bit, I think you can really make good use of technology, switch to electric, switch to an eco hybrid, or even switch to this sport hybrid so that you can get the most out of this vehicle. Kawasaki even says that you're actually buying 3 bikes in one, and I can agree with that in part. It's really cool how you can change the character of this bike from an economical city motorcycle, purely electric, to a real fun machine on the country road, and it works really well. I also really like the look. They have tried something different, not like the Ninja ZX4 RR that I recently tested, which doesn't really bring anything new to the table in terms of looks. It's something different. It looks cool and arouses people's curiosity. And above all, it fits in with such a modern concept. And I didn't like it that much. I've already said on the one hand that I don't have a kick down. This means that when I'm driving in automatic mode, I have to downshift myself to get out of tricky situations. I think that needs to be improved. And then quite simply, I need to be able to stop the bike in first gear. Especially here in Austria, we have a lot of mountains. We often park downhill. That would simply make it even safer if I knew that the bike wouldn't roll away when I parked it on the side stand. Yes, final question of course, how much does the bike cost? Prices are not known at the moment as I am here right now. If I find out or if they are published in the meantime, I'll be sure to include them in the description below or in my full report that will appear on the website. And yes, I would be interested to know what you think of hybrid. It's something completely new. It's still a combustion engine. That means we're sticking with gasoline, but we're bringing in modern technology, namely electricity, and combine them in a really cool symbiosis. So I'm thrilled. I'm also very excited to see what Kawasaki will do with it in the future. So let me know what you think in the comments, and also what Kawasaki should do with this hybrid drive in the future. I'm sure the industry representatives are reading the comments. That means write it diligently, and I'm open to further questions. Let me know in the comments. Give me a thumbs up. I would be very happy too. Today I've given you everything to understand this drive concept and to bring it closer to you. So thumbs up. I would be happy. See you in the next video. See you soon. Goodbye.